So here we've got we installed the clutch and the pressure plate. We put the clutch on first with the alignment tool, and then we put the pressure plate over top of it. And then looked in the factory service manual and found that the 5/8 size bolts, was it? Dad?
5/16.
5/16 size, sorry. Foot poundage goes to 17 foot-pounds on all the bolts, and make sure you go in a good pattern, opposite each other, diagonal, crossed.
Yeah. If they were 3/8 bolts, it was like 31 pounds or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's in the service manual. So we'll tighten those all up, and then it should be good.
Alright, I would put the brand new throw bearing on here. We cleaned up where the bearing sits with some wax and grease removing, put a fresh coat of wheel bearing grease, high temp wheel bearing grease on that. And this came pre-greased out of the package with the film on the inside, so should be good to go.
So here's the trans, ready to go in. We jacked up the back of the truck a little bit, so we can give ourselves some room to get it under, and then we'll jack it up into place, hopefully with no problems. Okay, we've got the Getrag up into position. We have about 4 or 5 bolts started, and just realized that on the bell housing to the Getrag, there's a male end, and there's also a male end on this adapter plate on the engine. So we're gonna try and drill it out and see if we can just get a bolt through there, because that doesn't really seem correct. So we're gonna drill it out and then see if we can get a bolt through there.
Alright, we got the bell housing all torqued on to, how many foot-pounds was that?
It was 30 foot-pounds is what we did on all the
30
bolts.
foot-pounds. And so then we hooked up the slave cylinder here. Just tighten that as tight as we can get it by the ratchet. Put the boot on and the rod in before you start the nuts there.
And we just tested it in the truck and pushed the clutch pedal down, and it depressed and returned just as it should.
Alright, so next thing we're going to do is...
say that again?
Next thing we're going to do is get a jack on the back of the transmission so we can drop our redneck transmission jack and mount the cross member.
Okay, here's the cross member with the old bushings and the old automatic transmission bottom plate cross member mounting point, I guess. I'm gonna take this off. I bought new bushings and replace the bushings. And from what I've read, I'm gonna have to drill different holes because they're apparently different on the Getrag than they are on the automatic. But I guess we'll find out. So, gonna replace the bushings and then mock it up and see if it fits. Okay, so we test fitted the cross member here, and it looks like we didn't have to re-drill new holes at all, so that's good. They fit perfectly, and got the new bushings on. We'll tighten everything up. Everything lines up pretty nicely, all the holes. So we'll tighten it all up, and then it should be good. Okay, so I mounted back up the transfer case shift levers. That's this here. And then we're also working on getting the shifter back in. We ended up having to take out the shifter to get the transmission up and in there, but the whole alignment is pretty well. So we're gonna put the shifter tower back on, and then put a boot on over top of that.
Right, shifter's in. We've got a shifter that goes through 5 gears, and we've got a clutch pedal that's operational. We're on the home stretch. Alright, now that we have the transmission in, we're going to continue to remove the stuff associated with the automatic transmission. So one of the things we need to remove is that the oil to or automatic transmission oil cooler here, that thing with the band around it back in there. The lines have been disconnected. There just should be a bracket, a couple of bolts to take that off. And the inlet and outlet feeds. The inlet exits just to the right of the radiator. Pretty difficult to see there, right there. That's the inlet, feeds into that there automatic transmission oil cooler. Then the outlet comes out of that and enters down there, just this side of the oil filter. So we're going to remove that. So step one for that is going to be to drain the radiator. There's a drain cock on the bottom left of the rad, so we'll do that now. Alright, we're draining the radiator here now. You see the drain cock up there on the bottom left of the radiator. Little trick we like to use is take an old soda bottle, cut it in half, something like that, and use that as a trough to feed it into your bucket so it doesn't splash all over the frame and all over the floor. Alright, we've got the radiator drain. We're just going to close this drain cock here on the bottom left of the radiator, and then we'll try to remove the automatic transmission oil cooler. Not absolutely necessary, but we're swapping out the ignition switch off the old automatic steering column onto the manual steering column. The only real difference is here, the truck we've got is an LE, and I suspect this chrome sort of bezel around the ignition is for an LE compared to this version that's just plain old black. And also we know that the light inside the ignition switch on this one here works, so we're just swapping them out. Just one thing, if you're thinking about doing that, is they've got these security Torx bits or Torx head screws on these, where they've got a little dimple in the middle of them, so you need to get a security Torx bit that's got a hole in the end of it. Okay, we got the ignition switch swapped over from the old automatic column to the manual column. Now we're swapping out the blinker flasher assembly. Again, this isn't necessary, but we know that everything was working fine on the automatic column, and we're not completely sure on the manual column. So quick swap. Again, it's got the security Torx head screws on it. 2 screws and off and on, pretty easy. Alright, here's a shot from on the floor up towards the automatic transmission oil cooler. Bracket looks to be 2 bolts towards the front, and kind of tough to see here, but looks to be, I think, 1 bolt on the back. I'll give that a shot, take that off. Alright, I was wrong. There was actually 4 bolts holding this bracket on. 2 in the front and 2 in the back. You see one I still have in there on the left. The other one's tucked up in here. You can feel around and get a socket with an extension on it. So I've taken 3 out. The fourth one's loose. Now this hard outlet line that leads down just forward of the oil filter, I'm going to hook it from the rubber hose that's up front, and check the same on the inlet from the top, and then that should be ready to come out. We're just disconnecting the hard line from the rubber hose. So you see down here just forward of the oil filter there's a little rubber hose, 90-degree elbow. We're going to loosen those 2 clamps, and same in under here, just right of the alternator. Loosen those clamps, and then there was a bracket for the up here attached to the manifold for it's attached to this hard line for the inlet. We'll undo that as well. Right, the automatic transmission oil cooler is out of the truck. I ended up finding it easier to undo all the hose clamps, so 2 at the outlet at the front of the block by the alternator, 2 at the inlet just forward of the oil filter, right on the front of the cooler itself, and again on the back of the cooler, and pulled the metal tubes off first, and then pulled the bracket and automatic transmission oil cooler assembly out through the bottom of the truck. It worked fine. So next things we're going to do is get some brand new heater hose and some new clamps and build a bypass from the inlet here or outlet, I guess would you call it, would go to the inlet on the oil cooler to where it fed back into the block here. So I'm thinking maybe 3 or 4 feet of 5/8 inside diameter heater hose, a couple of clamps will be good to go. I took the bracket off the alternator and loosened the bottom bolt so I could push it off to the side, more room to work. Okay, we built a bypass from the outlet on the top of the block to an inlet, bottom of the block, 5/8 inside diameter heater hose. Better solution might be to just keep the short 90 elbows on those inlets and outlets and just plug the end of them with a plug and a clamp rather than running this big loop of heater hose. But the ones that I have that came off the oil cooler aren't in the greatest shape, so I don't have any on hand. So we might do that down the road. But anyway, that'll allow us to fill it back up with coolant. When I pulled the air hose feeding the turbo from the air cleaner off, just to give me more room to work down there to get that hose on. Okay, I got the alternator back in position and the belt on, tightened up. The air cleaner tube feeding the turbo is back on, tightened up, and the heater hose bypass is in place. So the next task we got to do to remove all evidence of this being an automatic truck is to remove the oil to air cooler. Not sure how big this task is going to be, but you see it's sandwiched up between the intercooler and the radiator. It's looks to be maybe about 1 foot wide and maybe 4 or 5 inches in depth. So that is one thing we have to remove. That's the next task. And then the final thing would be to swap that out for a plate that only has the cargo light button and not the overdrive off button, which we have one of those as well. Okay, to remove the oil to air cooler, I figured the best way is to pull the grill off and then see what we have there. So first thing I did was pull off the 2 headlight bezels, just 2 screws in each bezel. And from what I can see, there's 4 screws along the bottom here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then maybe half a dozen across the top of the rad support. I'm not sure if there's any hidden fasteners anywhere, but we'll see. We'll give that a try. Take those fasteners out, see if the grill pops off. Okay, there was indeed a couple of hidden fasteners in behind parking lights right here. So parking light lens comes out pretty quickly. Again, 2 screws, parking light lens, the fasteners are here. So you see the screws in the parking light lens. Okay, grill's off. No other hidden fasteners, so it's 5 screws up along the top on the red support, 4 screws on the lower grill. Need to pull the headlight and the parking light assemblies out, and there's 1 screw each in behind where the parking lights were. So now we'll see if we can get this oil to air cooler out. There's a better look at it here. We've already disconnected the lines that were feeding the transmission. Okay, there seems to be only 5 nuts holding this thing on here. There's 2 in there on the left, 2 down in here, and then 1 that's clamping the lines on. After a second look, I think it's even easier. There's only 2. This whole thing's sitting on a bracket, so it looks like there's just 1 bolt here, and then a nut up here, and that whole thing should come off as long as we have enough room.